Once we know that we can cover our weekly, monthly expenses, maybe we start having, a month ahead in the bank so that as you're working for 2 months down the road. Then really start thinking about replenishing or building up your emergency fund if you haven't been able to do that during the pandemic. The other side of it is if you haven't been spending a lot of money and now you're starting to think about it again, make a plan for how much do you really want to spend on that every week, every month.
Studies routinely show that many Americans don't have enough emergency savings to cover expenses for 3 months. However, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, many are more aware of just how crucial an emergency fund can be. On today's Sound Living, establishing or replenishing emergency savings. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Building an emergency fund has always been an essential step toward achieving financial security. K-State Research and Extension Resource Management Specialist Elizabeth Kish says there's no magic number for an emergency fund because everyone's savings goal will depend on a variety of factors, including earnings and risk level for a financial emergency. Elizabeth, one of the things that was a result of the pandemic was the fact that we really were not, in some cases, spending nearly as much money on certain activities, certain things as we normally did. For some people, that was a way to boost their income for a while, but now as we get back to things that are a little bit more normalized, it looks like we're starting to pick up on some of those spending habits again, and this is an opportunity to remind people that watch your budget and maybe don't overspend so that you can continue to build or replenish that emergency savings.
That's correct. Emergency savings are for emergencies, the unanticipated events that happen. We talk about, broken or needing to replace a appliance. Sometimes, it's a little bit, well, not a little, it can be more serious if we're unemployed for long periods of time or if we have unanticipated health care expenses. So some people may have ended up spending a lot of their emergency fund or all of it. Some people may have actually spent less during the last year and a half and are now, as you said, going back to a physical work location rather than remote or, starting to want to travel to do things. And so it definitely is a time to think about our budgets. And I think if we sort of step back and think about our budgets and think about the way our income flows and how our expenses go as well, we need to, first of all, cover our weekly, monthly expenses. And then the next step up would be to think about, okay, do I have money maybe for next month's expenses ahead of time? And again, not saying that this can be all accomplished overnight because we recognize that everyone's situation is different and it can be a challenge. But once we know that we can cover our weekly, monthly expenses, maybe we start having, a month ahead in the bank so that as you're working for the, 2 months down the road. Then really start thinking about replenishing or building up your emergency fund if you haven't been able to do that during the pandemic. And that would be, slow and steady, wins the race. Again, sometimes we're reluctant to spend money from our emergency funds, right? We're like, oh, is this a big enough emergency? And sometimes we just have to spend it. So that's kind of the rebuilding part of it. The other side of it is if you haven't been spending a lot of money and now you're starting to think about it again, or you actually are, for example, going out to eat or other entertainment options, just make a plan for how much do you really want to spend on that every week, every month, and going forward. Because it can add up fast, and sometimes those are expenditures that we don't necessarily notice until we're like, wow, where'd all my money go? And then you think back, oh, yeah, I did this, I did that.
We're kind of caught up in that atmosphere of wanting to get out, wanting to be around other people, but at the same time, we also need to remember that there is a cost associated with that. And one of the things we often talk about is paying yourself first.
That's right. So again, when we talk about budgeting and financial management in general, is to be thoughtful and aware and sort of deliberate in your choices. So when you pay yourself first, that means you are making that personal investment in your future, in your peace of mind on a sort of day-to-day, month-to-month basis. And so if you can take it off the top and you can automate that, which means you would set the transfers up within your financial institution or potentially from your employer if you're able to have your paycheck deposited in multiple accounts. And you wouldn't even have to do anything. It's kind of set it and forget it. Or you have a routine that you follow on a regular basis when you do your financial tasks. And maybe you do the transfer yourself. That way you see it. It's a way to sort of touch our money. Or if you get paid in cash, for example, if you're working and you get tips or something like that, you actually go and either take the money to the drive-thru or go inside the financial institution or take it to the ATM and deposit it yourself. But do that first and then pay your other bills. And hopefully you also have a plan for how much you're going to spend for entertainment, and then you have your plan.
And we want those emergency savings to be liquid, safe, and something that we can access relatively easily.
That's right. I think, a lot of people have some small or modest amounts of cash, maybe a couple $100 at home in a safe place where they know, because if the power goes out, I think one thing we have to remember, if the power goes out, everything else goes out, right? You can't immediately sometimes access funds from an ATM machine. You can't necessarily use a card. So sometimes it's just good to have a little bit of cash at a safe place at home. But then the bulk of your emergency savings, you would want to keep someplace safe, like a financial institution, a bank or a credit union. Then you can think about, okay, relatively easy to access means in the case of an emergency fund, maybe it's across town versus like your neighborhood branch or your neighborhood institution, so that you're not just going there and frittering it away. Sort of a little bit out of sight, out of mind, but definitely available when you need it.
And I guess because the interest rates are so low, we want to make sure that we're also not paying a lot in fees.
That's right. Fees can really eat away at a savings account. And so you really need to be careful or understand the terms if you're setting up a new account, or this can also be a really good opportunity to review the current terms of your current account, because financial institutions do update their terms of service regularly. So you want to make sure, for example, do you have the kind of account where you can only have a limited number of withdrawals and maybe even a limited number of deposits a month? Or depending on your balance, can you have more withdrawals? That kind of thing. Also, if you get below a certain balance, is there a charge until you get back up to a minimum threshold? Those are the kind of things you want to look at.
We also want people to think about doing this long-term, as you mentioned, and part of that is doing this regularly. And there's a couple of programs, Kansas Saves and America Saves, that could really help people get started.
That's right, and thanks for mentioning that. Kansas Saves, which is affiliated with America Saves, is a program to encourage everyone to increase their savings and or reduce the amount of debt that they're carrying. And one of the savings goals that is recommended is often to build or establish an emergency fund. Other goals can be, for example, to save for home ownership, save for a new car, put money aside long-term for retirement. And I guess maybe just mentioning saving for a new car, we've been hearing about sort of inventories might be a little bit low and prices high. And so if maybe you've decided to hang on to an existing car for another year or two until things loosen up. So this might be a really good time to start thinking about putting money aside for your next vehicle while you're waiting until inventories are a little bit higher.
Well, and I think we've also seen that just normal prices are going up, gas prices, food prices, housing, as you mentioned, cars. So really we never know what's going to be coming down the road, so we do really need to be prepared. That's
right. And as you say, it feels like prices are going up. I think as we continue to open up or, sort of all of us get back into the world more, hopefully some of those prices will go down because transportation will become more regular maybe. And so hopefully some of those transportation costs will go down.
The other part of this is not only do we want to save money, protect our money, but we also want to make sure that our money stays as our money. And one of the things that always happens when something goes like the pandemic, we see a lot of scams pop up, and this was certainly no exception.
You're right. So right. We see there's the pandemic-related scams. If as summer weather might be extreme and if, there are tornadoes or flooding, there's usually scams in those communities as well. So we always need to be on our guard. And what we need to be on our guard for is the hook, right? So the pandemic is the hook for these scams. So we want to watch for unsolicited offers or emails or other communications from people that we don't recognize, but they act like they know us. If you feel uncomfortable, it can be a scam, maybe not. But so you want to slow down. You want to do a little bit of research. Don't click any links if these things come from a text or from email. I've lately been getting, it feels like, a lot of text scams. But, use your internet browser, a separate internet browser, and do a little bit of investigating to see if this could be legitimate, if it sounds interesting. If it doesn't sound interesting or it doesn't apply to you, then just delete it right away or hang up. We all want to be polite, but, you also have to look out for yourself. Remember that the old adage, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And if someone is saying that, you qualify for some program, but you have to pay money to access more money, that's likely a scam. If it's, especially if it's the government, you don't usually have to, I don't think ever have to pay money to get money from the federal government. Other things to think about are limit your potential losses. Again, if it sounds like there's a product or service that really could be useful to you, but you're not sure if it's a scam, then use a form of payment that gives you protection, which would be your credit card, because you have protection against liability for unauthorized charges, and the payments are traceable. Doesn't mean it won't still involve some effort and time on your part if it does turn out to be a scam, but you do have some protection. And then, again, the internet can be really a helpful place to look for things. Obviously, the Better Business Bureau and even the Federal Trade Commission protects consumers as well.
I was talking with my dad last week, and he mentioned that he's stopped answering his phone because he was getting 30, 40 of these scam-type calls a day from telemarketers. So I have to leave him a message on his machine, and then he'll call me back. But he just got to the point where he was just tired of answering the phone, and it looked like it was maybe somebody in his hometown, but it wasn't. It was a telemarketer, and he just finally got fed up with it.
Wow, that's interesting, but it reminds me of the Do Not Call Registry. And there is a national Do Not Call Registry where you can, and it takes a while for it to all kick in. So sometimes you need to do it like every quarter, but you can register. It's at donotcall.gov. And so that might help. And then it does, I'm just looking at the website now, and it says if you received an unwanted call after your number was on the National Registry for 31 days, then you can report it. Again, it's difficult sometimes because they use these technology that makes it look like a local call or the numbers change. But that would be one thing that people could do.
And I think you really hit it on the head when you said be on your guard and never, ever give out your personal information.
That's right. They may have your name, or they may make it sound like they have your name. They may have your address, but they want to verify it for some reason. Certainly never give your Social Security number out to any call that you haven't initiated. And also, your bank account and credit card information you don't want to give out. Driver's license, any of those pieces of personal identifying information that somebody could use then to steal your identity.
That's K-State Research and Extension Family Resource Management Specialist Elizabeth Kish. More information on establishing or replenishing emergency savings is available at county and district extension offices and online at kansassaves.org or americasaves.org. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.